I call to order this meeting of the King George County Board of Supervisors. I'll give an invocation, and Mr. Miller will lead us in the pledge. So everyone, please rise. Okay. We'll open the floor for public comment. If anyone is here to give comment, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And when you come up, please provide your name and your address. So at this time, the floor is open for public comment. Mr. Dines, do we have anyone online?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Did anyone receive correspondence to be entered into the record for tonight? Okay, in that case, I will close public comment and we will move on to budget discussions. So we'll start with schools information.
Yes, so we wanted to, I guess, pick up where everything kind of ended last week. And, you know, as you can see on your agenda, we're going to allow Dr. Boyd and Ms. Williams to talk through their numbers. And then we have a revenue summary for the county and the schools, expenditure summary by major category, and discuss possible cuts or other funding options, and then a proposed public safety step increases, which is currently not in your expenditure summary, but we do have a sheet that'll explain what we're doing. So I guess I'll turn it back over to you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my agenda. Dr. Boyd, I'm going to hand it off to you. If there's anything, I know you had a couple of documents you handed out. Would you like to go through those?
Yes, sir. Chairman Granger, thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I know we've got an opportunity this evening. I guess it's the next agenda item to take a look at the revenue summary for the county and the schools. I just wanted to, again, take a look at the expenditure side of the budget, and I did provide a handout for you guys. I can tell you this last week, since we had our last meeting, Mrs. Williams and I, and really a lot of our supervisors and a lot of our staff sat down and really tried to crunch a lot of numbers, and I'd like to talk you through some of what we came up with. We're certainly trying to make this work, and I think we've come up with what we really need, bare minimum, to get by. So if you take a look at the piece of paper that I gave you guys, budget priorities and associated costs, the way that's set up is on the left-hand side of that page, what you'll see is the initiative. And what we have on that page there is the initiative that is of our greatest priority at the top of the page, working down to a lesser priority towards the bottom of the page. And for example, you'll see the initiative, the 5% compensation increase without the new positions included. That would cost the locality $1.2 million. And as you work your way down, what you'll see is the cost in the second column and the cumulative cost in the third column. If you work down to the budget builder necessities, if you remember, that budget builder was originally over $1 million, 1.1, I think it was, somewhere in that ballpark. We've really sat down this week and tried to scratch that as much as we can in order to make this work. I know I listened to everyone's comments and questions and line of questions last week and tried to answer those through this document. And you can see that, you know, we've cut that pretty substantially, but those are the items that in order for us to continue to do business at the pace and with the efficiency that we're currently doing at, these are the numbers that we would be looking at. So budget builder's been cut in half. The next line I want to bring your attention to is if you talk to folks across the state, as we know, we're working off the skinny budget right now. And there's a lot of optimism about a lot of optimism, that after primaries take place and we get into the second or third week of June, we're going to have a budget addendum, excuse me. And we're certainly hoping that the Senate or delegate, the House budget passes a 7% raise at that point. If that's the case, that would be an additional $111,000 to the local budget to match that 7% that the state's providing. And then finally, at the bottom there, before I turn it back over, is we have worked down, I think, what was originally about a $1.6 million price tag for new positions. We've tried to work with everyone as much as we possibly can to shuffle some of the responsibilities and needs of the positions in that area. And we come to you. Honestly, I know I've had a lot of conversations with folks about how we don't, we're worried about the bottom line here and we don't need to dig into these positions. But I know you have a difficult decision to make, and so do our citizens in the community about how we fund schools. So I wanted to be as transparent as possible and make sure that everybody knows, exactly what we intend to do with the positions that we absolutely need to have. So that's that document there, and I can pause for any questions if anybody has any.
Yes, Dr. Boyd. First of all, I'd just like to say thank you to you and your board and staff for working. I'm sure it's very difficult to scale back. Obviously, there's a lot of needs in this community, and so I really do appreciate the efforts to try to work with us to address those kinds of concerns as well. I do have a question though in regards to the 7% teachers compensation increase. If the state were not to move forward with it, and we wanted to move forward with the 7%, do you know how much it would be to? So it's $111,368 to cover the non-SOQ positions. Do you know how much it would require from the county in order to also do the SOQ positions?
That's total.
So this is total for both. So I want to make sure I understand. It sounded like two questions to me. The first question I heard was that if the state does not come back at 7,
Yes,
what would it cost the locality to cover everyone at 7?
that was my question.
Okay, we don't have that number now, but we can get it for you.
Okay.
And then the second question I heard was,
I didn't have a second question.
yeah, okay. Well, then I answered it. All right. Okay.
I apologize for any
Hey,
confusion.
no worries.
That's
No
fine.
worries.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Collins, did you have a question?
Thank you. So on the 5% on the cost, 1,243,046, is that the county's portion or is
Yes.
it including the SOQ? What you will get?
Both. It would be the county's portion of covering the remainder of the positions outside of SOQ.
That's the expectation from the county.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
the expectation of the county to cover all positions.
So they're already covered under the state budget, some of them.
Some of them, the SOQ positions.
So the 1.2 is the remainder.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else have any further questions for Dr. Boyd at the moment?
Okay. And I can certainly, I know revenue is the next item on the agenda and can certainly turn that over to Mrs. Hahn if that's the direction we're going in. Yes.
Ms. Hahn?
So first, in the school's discussion, I wanted to make sure that everybody understands the composite index and what it is. So I have the definition straight from the VDOE website. So the composite index determines the school division's ability to pay education costs fundamental to the Commonwealth standards of quality, SOQ, with local funds. The composite index is calculated using 3 indicators of a locality's ability to pay: true value of real property, weighted at 50%, adjusted gross income, weighted at 40%, and taxable retail sales, weighted at 10%. So currently, our composite index is 38.05%. When you look at the calc tool that the schools use for the budget, when they figure up the locality's required effort, local effort, they only do the 38.05 on the SOQ positions. It has been common practice throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia that it's the locality's ability to pay means 38.05% of their general fund request. And so that is one thing to keep in mind, it's not just the required local effort, but for those additional positions outside of the SOQ. And am I not speaking out of turn there, Dr. Boyd?
Nope, that sounds perfect to me.
And this is the sheet. We just wanted to put it in your presentation, but make sure you had it out as well. So this page here represents, and we also handed out a copy of the revised revenue numbers that the schools have. So the first one isn't included in their total revenues, but the first line here are the county transfers. In the current fiscal year, the county provided 21.1 million in local funding. If you come over to the next column, proposed 23-24, there's two different numbers in here. The composite index based on the general fund budget request is 22,187,654. And from the revenue sheet that Dr. Boyd presented, and we gave you a handout of that tonight, their request is $23,283,038. So their request is actually over the composite index.
Can I ask a quick question? So the 23,283,038 looks like it's 21,1 added by 2,183,038, which does not include the essential new positions that are being requested by the schools. So I was
Their
just wondering.
new request, and I believe they handed out this sheet here with their total funding request. Your new positions are listed in that, or they're not in that. So that is on top of this. So the numbers that we have coming up in the expenditure slides are not going to have those included in there. Now the 5% pay increase is included in there. And the health insurance, everything except for that last item.
Everything except for the last two
items
Mhm.
is in
Is in the
your
budget.
in your budget totals.
Mhm.
I think Mr. Collins had a question. Go ahead.
Yes, so I asked a question a couple meetings ago about the Medicaid money. Is that, I don't see that anywhere in there.
The Medicaid money we have it underneath miscellaneous state revenue. It's not, so when we get it, we normally don't get it until end of June, July.
So it's not included in that.
It's included in the
It's
state,
included in
in the
revenue.
state line.
And it's here too. They
Yeah,
have this document. It's in the revenue document on first page, state miscellaneous revenue.
Mhm.
How much?
You're looking at that? I think it's listed at 150,000.
Yes. Yeah, because we never know what we're gonna get.
Mm-hmm.
So only 150,000?
Yeah, that's the estimate
That's the estimate.
because it always comes in after.
Yeah.
So you have the past 3 years amount? Because it's usually a lot
I know
higher.
last year we got a check at the end of the year and it was a little over 300,000, but we didn't get it until I want to say it was in the beginning of July, end of June. So that just went towards the revenue and towards the expense. It's never slotted for anything in particular. It just goes towards our revenue and offsets our expenditure balance.
And so the year before that, so last year was 300,000. The year before that, how much was it?
I don't know without looking.
So doesn't it usually run in the 300,000 to 500,000 range?
Not always. Last year, I know it was over 300.
We can look it up.
And
for
that
you.
was the biggest check I believe that we have received. But yeah, we can look it up for you and definitely let you know.
So so I'm wondering, you say 150 this year, why would you bring it down if last year was 300?
Well, actually, we could increase it.
Huh?
I said we could increase that amount, the state miscellaneous revenue amount. We could increase receiving to 300.
Yeah. We underestimate it too. I mean, we don't want to overestimate that, certainly, as far as revenue is concerned. It's usually a good idea to underestimate it slightly. But I follow your logic. We can certainly get those numbers for you.
So if you come in at 150 and you get 300, where does the 150 go? Because you already got your budget
normally back to the county.
Really? I haven't seen it. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming out this evening. So can our finance staff, can you tell us how much the schools reported back to us based off of what was just stated last year?
So last year, if I remember correctly, it was roughly 1.3 million that they had left over in total funds. And then we returned about 700,000.
Yeah, I believe it was like 667, 660.
667 in encumbrances that they had. So that's a delta of what, about 6.5, or let's see. So the encumbrances, so 667 was returned to the general fund. It was 731,441 in encumbrances that went back to the school. And the general fund balance was increased by 667, 527, 40 and 43 cents.
Thank you. And I just want to put out there, I want to thank you, Dr. Boyd, because it's been brought to my attention by a number of your personnel that you or your designee sent an email to staff advising them that there should not be massive end of year spending prior to the end of your budget cycle. So I want to thank you very much for that.
Absolutely. Trying to make it work.
Mr. Collins, you have another question?
It was in the realm of Ms. Kupka's question. So do you know the year before, how much money they returned?
667. Oh, the year before.
Levita can look that up, and we can circle back to it when she gets
Well, I
out.
was trying to figure kind of on an average.
So we'll circle back as soon as she finds that. And then these are the our proposed revenues for 2023, 2024 for the county side. And the two, both the county and the revenue that comes directly into the schools total 111 million. And that, well, because that's all the revenues, and doesn't include the transfer. So this is the revenue that comes in total for everything before you do your transfer. And yes.
On the revenue. So why is such a big drop in the license permit fees? For proposed?
So that is because included in that revenue is the landfill, the money we get from the landfill. And we had been getting 500,000 every year from the expansion, and current fiscal year is the last year for that $500,000. The next slide here is broken out by major categories, starting with the school, what their request is based on the sheet that is in front of you. That includes their general fund, their grants revenue, as well as the cafeteria. And this year, Mr. Miller asked me to split out how much of the debt service is for the schools. The schools already disclosed it in their list that they gave you, but the debt service for the schools is $4,508,316, where the debt service on the county side is $3,470,969 for the total of the $7.9 million in debt debt payments, not debt, but debt payments. And so with all of the expenditures, you'll see it's by major category. The public safety increased to 17.9 million. Social services, as you'll see in here, there is a decrease in social services funding, and that is because they have requested a lower amount next fiscal year for the CSA program. They'll probably be turning money in the current fiscal year that wasn't used for that program this year, so they have reflected that in their ask for next year. General government is most of your departments that don't generate revenue, or not none of them really generate revenue other than like community development with their permits and things, but they are included in the general government, but it's administration, your county attorney, finance, information technology, economic development, and your miscellaneous transfers for your outside agencies. And that's where all of that falls. Constitutional officers, a slight increase there. Public Works, that's your engineering department, your landfill, your convenience center, and your general properties fall under Public Works. And there's a slight request increase there. Institutions, that's our regional jail and our juvenile center up in Rappahannock, up in Stafford. Those are our shares for those participating at those facilities. Capital Improvement Fund, you'll notice that there is a drop in it this year because we had put money aside in last year's Capital Improvement Fund for the radio system as well as the completion of the courthouse. They have now been transferred over to debt service. Smoot Library, there is a increase in Smoot Library. Most of that, not all of it, but a big portion of that, it contributes to the increase in state revenue for books, for them to purchase books. Tourism Fund, you'll see the increase there. That is the increase to cover that part-time events coordinator position. The Health Department, this is the first time that they have requested an increase in funding in several years. So they requested a slight amount, and Parks and Rec has about a $400,000 request. So total expenditure requests are $114,768,561.
That's a quick question.
Mhm.
On the school's operating fund, the 61,956,375, does that include the essential positions requests the
I
schools
think
had?
you all said it did not.
I just want to make sure it does not.
Does
So that number does not include those positions then?
No.
Understood. Okay, thank you. Mr. Collins.
The public safety increase there, does that include their step increase?
That includes the current STEP program as well as the sheriff has in his operating budget a request for a total of 7 replacement vehicles and 1 new vehicle for 400 and some. I've got it in a future slide.
Okay, so that increase is due to the cars and what?
Their pay increases, yes.
Okay, and general government, the increase there is for the positions or what? What's the?
So these increases, it's a lot from the different departments that came previously and reported. I know that there was a large increase in the county administrator's budget because we now have the PIO position and some things to get some programs up and running for the county, as well as the money that we put in there for site.
So like, for instance, the county administrator's budget's got $175,000 increase. I talked about it at a previous meeting where you have 90,000 of that is site development associated with any third-party consultant, and the 3 TP with the data center application that Birch would put in. Conceivably, we're going to get it back, but we're going to spend it, and then we file to ask for the reimbursement. But it's
still another around 800,000.
And then,
yeah. Okay.
well,
I was just giving you an example.
And then also in that budget, Mr. Dines spoke at that meeting how he had moved the service that we get from Proactive for our and he can probably speak to it better than I can,
So there's, a-
that had been in the CIP in the past, but it's really no longer a capital project. It is a maintenance effort.
so there's about 300 and, was it 350,000 that was at one time capital, but it's not capital. It needs to be in your operating budget. And so that's what Mr. Dines was moving that into the operating budget. So that accounts for 350,000. So if you want us to go through it all, we can go through it. But I think we covered general government at the last several meetings
So
ago.
institutions, so how many institutions?
We
Two?
have two.
So how much more, so Rappahannock Regional was the same as last year?
Rappahannock Regional Jail and Rappahannock Juvenile Center.
Right, Rappahannock Regional Jail was the same as last year. So how much is the increase for the juvenile center?
The jail actually is not exactly the same as it was last year. I believe that the debt, decreased, but, that's under the debt services.
Right. I think it was like a net
I could pull
a
it up.
net gain for the county, but it was because of the fact that our debt portion that we contribute to the jail went down like 200,000, but they had $100,000 operating increase,
$100,000 what?
an operating increase that our operating budget will deal with, but then they had the 200,000 in debt reduction. So
But
it
it was a-
translates into a gain for the county.
Translate, so I saw the budget, I was there. It was zero amount more than we had to pay than last year.
Because they're telling you what they're presenting to you is your operating budget was going to go up, but then you also then had deductions or reductions in your contributions for the debt service. So they were saying that's a net.
So
A
that,
net.
So
Train.
this is my thinking. So let's say last year we gave them $1 million for the budget, for the debt. We gave them $1 million. I don't know what the number is off the top of my head.
for them.
And this year, it was the same thing. There was no change.
Well, it actually, in the operating budget, it was a slight change of $71,322, bringing the jail's request up to $942,491. The big increase was for the juvenile center, where for the current year, the budget is $351,457, and their budget request for this fiscal year, coming up fiscal year, is $603,787, which was an increase of $252,330. So between the two of them, it increased by $323,652.
Okay, so maybe I can ask my fellow members. So if we have zero increase in Rappahannock, in debt and what their budget, the rest of the money is going to the juvenile center.
You said it went from like 350 to like 6 something for the juvenile?
I think the total delta was like 252,000
Okay. So
For the juvenile, yes.
for the juveniles.
And that's 71,320 for the jail.
which gets you to 323. Okay.
Thank you. There was one more, the Parks and Rec. That was like 400,000 and what, besides the director of Love and Affection, what was the other positions?
So I know you had some increases, he had increases in his part-time labor and
One of the challenges there is that is all four of our budgets. So $650,000 of that is activity fund. So that balances off with revenue and doesn't actually come out of the taxpayers' pockets.
I believe you increased that this year, didn't you?
Yes. It went up some from last year. And some of that difference is also in that activity fund.
But that's what you're gonna spend.
Yes, but not all of that comes out of general tax revenue. 35% of that is,
So the activities fund was never in the, it was just an account that was not included in the regular budget.
correct, but it's in the total requested expenditures because it has to be appropriated every year, even though the activity fund has a balance in it, just like the tourism fund. So when the numbers that I use, which I guess are just a little bit off from what Mrs. Hahn has from a couple weeks ago, 61.6% of that number was general fund budget and 38.4% was activity fund budget.
And
How
if
much
you
is in the
notice in
activity
your revenue spreadsheet, you'll have, for his activity budgets, you will have revenue numbers that equal. They're an exact match, but you still have to show the expenditures.
How much is in your activity fund?
This moment.
You mean the fund balance?
Mhm.
Levita will check on that for you.
Just trying to find places to get money from.
Mr. Stats, did you have any questions? I think you said you did.
Just one. So I see the debt payment, but I don't see how much debt we actually have. Just for clarification, do you have that number?
We definitely can provide that for you.
I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Might be a second, but we'll get it. Maybe somebody else. has
Okay,
any other questions?
Yeah, did anyone else have any other questions while Ms.
Yeah,
Cobb
this
is looking
is
up? I think the,
Ms. Holland. Ms. Holland, so the one we got last time, the spreadsheet, is lots of difference than this new one. And some of them have increased, like the general property tax one. It was 510 on the last time, it's 769 this time.
Well, and I think that's because as I think I explained it the last time, we get the numbers from the Commissioner of Revenue and I think that they were working to try to provide
So on
you
the,
that information.
well, on the general, you're talking about on the expenditure side, correct?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I
So
thought you were talking
Yeah.
revenue side. I
So on
apologize.
general properties, there was some information on insurances that we did not have previously that we received.
On buildings,
Mhm.
okay. On buildings.
That the insurance had to be updated.
It's a several $100,000 difference. And several of these are different than last time and not in a good way.
Well, human resources, if you remember at the last meeting, we realized that the amount for the retiree healthcare had not been included, and that's been added to human resources now.
We hadn't made that
Um,
decision to do that. Why would we add it if we haven't made that decision to do it yet?
To show you what the total dollars requested, because this spreadsheet is a working spreadsheet until you say it's approved.
So I'm a little frustrated that you would include that when we have not approved it. It was presented to us, but it was not approved. So why would we slide it in there like that?
Well, it's the same thing that we went back and adjusted and took out some positions that you all talked about at the last meeting. I think that you all directed us to put that kind of information in your budget because the board seems to support that. We took that as the case. If that's not the case, then we need further clarification. I thought that the board had indicated an interest in having us put this into the budget.
The board, from my understanding of me hearing it, was that we supported the ideal, but we didn't say that we were going to do it this year.
Okay.
So
We-
we were
Okay.
heading down that road, but I don't think we got to the end of that road this year.
Well,
Okay.
I know that if I may offer just a little bit more clarification, that Mr. Messler came and talked about this and that if you wanted to do something, you had to commit to it early, and we did. as a placeholder with the state. And so if we're gonna follow through, we're not gonna do it, then I mean, you need to let us know, but he's been working because we were under the direction that this board supported us doing that this year.
So it was said, put it as a placeholder so he could continue that, not that we were gonna fund that.
So,
So he had the opportunity to do that because he couldn't do that if we didn't have the placeholder.
we wouldn't be able to fund it this year if he didn't have the placeholder. If we hadn't gone forward with it, then it would have been impossible to implement this year. We could have done it in the following year. So I don't think it's unfair to say that staff, looking at the fact that we approved that in order to say, yes, we want to at least have the opportunity to do it this year, could be viewed as tacit agreement that there's a desire to really do this. I don't know if we've out and out said, yes, let's do it, yay, verily. So we can go forth right now and ask everyone how they feel about it.
Can I go first?
Sure.
All of these numbers
I-
are preliminary. That's why it's preliminary, is that all these numbers are added in there. So nothing until it goes to the adopted line is it. So all these numbers can be removed if wanted. But we don't have an idea of the whole budget unless they put all these numbers into it.
Go ahead. How do you
So with the shortfall that we have this year, and we're trying to make up this 5% for the schools raises and the 5% for the county, and we're looking for $2 to $4 million. I think we should hold off until our revenues are a little better than they are this year.
Anyone else?
Thank you for putting those numbers in there. I'm glad to see them. So
Okay.
like worst case scenario, we can cut it down.
Are you interested in leaving it in for the time being, or did you want to remove it?
I would leave it in.
Leave it in.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you. Could staff remind us as to what that number is? Either
$68,460.72.
$68,000.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm all for keeping it in there for now and revisit as we make further determinations on cuts. Thank you.
I think Ms. Binder's okay with keeping it in there for the time
Yeah.
being.
I'm fine.
I am as well.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I mean, we can continue to go down and go through these line items, but, you know, we did have other portions of our presentation where we're proposing to do some things. I think, you know, Mr. Collins is asking about the police, or excuse me, the public safety, and we've got obviously a proposal in there to do something different with the way Sheriff Giles has got his vehicles. We're proposing we can kind of walk through some of our other proposals and some of the things that you all indicated you wanted to see from last week in terms of positions that we were asking for and what that reduction, what that situation looks like by taking some of those positions out. So do you want us to
Sure.
keep going? Or
Let's
do you
let's
want
present that. We can circle back to discuss expenditures after fact, and maybe they'll also provide some more clarity. So, yeah.
Do we have his questions answered, Mr.
Um,
Collins and Mr. Stats'
she's,
questions?
we're still working on Mr. Stats' question, but, so for the previous fiscal year on the schools, they returned $1,847,546.72, of which they had $774,001 encumbered. So $1,073,545.72 was returned to the general fund. Medicaid in the current year, the current year through March, they've received $96,379. In fiscal year 22, at the end of the year, they received $505,745. And fiscal year 21, at the end of the year, they received $466,293. Thank you, Ms. Kyle.
Okay, so you want to keep going?
So After receiving the revised numbers from the schools, the total estimated revenues equal 111,800,345. The requested expenditures after revised numbers from the schools, and we cut the zoning enforcement officer, the 2 bailiffs, and converted the 2 probation clerk positions to part-time. The total expenditures are $114,768,561. At this point, that leaves a shortfall of $2,968,216. Here is where Mr. Miller was just talking about. We're suggesting that we possibly fund the 7 replacement vehicles and the 1 new vehicle request from the ARP funds or either general fund balance, and that would free up $464,000 in the operating fund request. So I didn't know if you wanted me to pause there and if y'all wanted to have any discussion on that.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair. The first bullet point, I wanted to see, I know Ms. Hahn had emailed me about the question I asked at the last work session about the suggestion for the proration clerk positions to not be full-time. And then the commissioner, the deputy commissioner, provided some data that I know y'all were copied on, but I wanted to see if there'd be consensus of the board at a future work session, and I don't know if it could be whatever we do next week or maybe the week after, depending on their schedules, but to have the treasurer and the commissioner come back and join us to give us a breakdown of some data about what proration would look like as far as revenue and expenditure for staff.
It seems reasonable to me. I think that we can invite them when they're either next week or the following week. Are we amenable to that?
My only question is this going to delay our decisions on the budget?
I don't know that cumulatively that's gonna have a major impact. I think you have bigger matters to kind of tackle.
I'm
so-
just concerned that we keep delaying this.
And I
start
don't say
losing
it
people.
to delay it. I just say that, so I don't know if the treasurer reached out to any of the rest of you, but he did reach out to me today, and my suggestion to him was to reach out to the rest of you as well, regarding some creative possibilities, as far as their staff go. So I think, I'm not saying this would need to delay it. I'm just saying we need to bring them back in the conversation to see if that's something that we can do or not.
I don't want him having it. It's just, we can't keep pushing it.
I'm not trying to push it. I'm not trying to say that a work session next week doesn't happen, whether they can come or not. I'm sorry. And that's not what I meant.
Okay.
I didn't mean that at all. I meant we need to keep plowing forward, but let's see if we can get them to come back around with us and re-engage them on that issue.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anyone have further questions about those first 2 bullet points? Does Mr. Collins?
The second bullet point, it says fund the 7 replacement vehicles and 1 new vehicle through the ARPA or general fund balance. So the ARPA is separate than the general fund balance. In this sheet, is that included in the general fund, the vehicles?
Currently, of course, because it is a request, it is in the sheriff's office budget request. ARP funds are not included in the revenues because they are a special revenue stream that has already been accepted and appropriated in the current fiscal year budget. It's appropriated to a line item called ARP eligible projects. And with approval from the board, we move money from the project line over to a specific project line.
So if we took the 464 from the ARPA, that would give us a 464 more in the
Less,
general.
yes.
Yes, sir.
More to spend.
Less
would-
expenditures.
So the shortfall would come down by basically to 2.5,
Well-
By 464.
but it would be dropped by 464, yes.
What's the balance in the ARP fund?
It's like
Currently, it is $1,034,424.50.
So I'm going to be honest, I think that we should move forward with moving this and funding it through the ARP fund personally. Go ahead.
I just have one clarifying question. And how long do we have to use the funds up? Is
So those
coming,
funds have to be encumbered by December 31st, 2024, and expended by December 31st, 2026.
okay, thank you.
And I think we have the answer for Mr. Stats. So for general government and school debt, it is 139, is that million or billion?
Not billion. It's not billion.
139 million.
We're just like,
$242,717.54. So $139,242,717.54
Is
our
that, that's just
outstanding.
both, right?
That's combined. Yes.
Do we know the breakdown of the,
give us a second.
While they're looking that up, I'll ask my colleagues. I'd said I'm in favor of using the ARP funds in order to fund those replacement vehicles. How does everyone else feel about that?
I'm okay with that, just that we need to be cautious because
Mhm.
they'll be wanting more vehicles and we start taking out that. We have to be worried about the next go around a year or two and they need more, but I'm fine this year so we can find more money for other things.
Well, we
And-
could either do the ARP fund or the general fund balance. So it could be either or, but.
And the sheriff did mention when we had our meetings with him that because of COVID, his replacement schedule got thrown out of rotation and that next year his ask will be much smaller on his vehicles.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I agree. We always said throughout the process that it was wiser to use the ARPA money for one-time expenditures, even though I know eventually we will need more vehicles, new vehicles to replace them, but smarter to use it for things like that. And since Ms. Bender asked, there is a stop date on when we can still use that money, so we might as well do it while we need to and can. Thank you.
Would you all like to make a motion tonight, or would you rather me bring that back to the next regular board?
Do you
meeting?
actually need a motion or can you just have?
I need a motion.
Okay, so you want us to make a motion to,
To move the 464,000 from the current, for the fiscal year 2024 operating budget to the current year ARPA projects line, or ARP project for the sheriff's office vehicles.
if anyone would like to say so moved, go for it.
So moved.
second?
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, chair votes aye, motion carries.
And then the next item was, I went back and looked at some other one-time expenditures that we might possibly use general fund balance for. There is the sheriff's office is requesting 21,000 for a sign trailer. And Mr. Dines and the IT department is requesting 45,000 for Meraki equipment. Is that upgrades?
Yes, ma'am.
And that totals 66,000. So we're suggesting that we do another one-time expenditure from general fund balance to purchase these two items.
I would suggest taking out the 21,000 for the sign trailer. I don't think that's a necessary item this year.
Anyone else? How do people feel about using the general fund balance for the one-time expenditures on either one or the other, or both?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would like to is just a little bit more, because I don't remember off the top of my head why we needed the new sign trailer.
We can certainly get more information from Sheriff Giles on that.
I was gonna say, I don't remember anything even being spoken about that.
It was going way back. I thought that we talked about that in some of those items.
That's why I asked. I just don't remember that one, so that's.
I don't think he really talked about that.
I think that if I remember the presentation, there were things that then you all kind of picked that you wanted to ask specific information, and I think that one might have got through.
The only trailer I remember is Parks and Rec. I don't remember any other trailer.
So,
Well, we'll get clarification and we'll get an answer for you.
So,
but if we were to remove it for now and we want to move forward with purchasing it later, we could still use general fund balance at that point. So I
Yes.
think there might be a desire to see that removed from the budget.
All right.
Would my colleagues agree? I don't want to.
But we're gonna remove it.
All right, then I'm going to circle back to the Meraki equipment for the IT department and the cost of $45,000. Is there an appetite to use the general fund balance in order to do a one-time expenditure on that particular item?
that's one time.
Ms. Hahn? Mr. Collins was asking, why would the recommendation not be to use the ARP funding for the Meraki equipment?
So we could do that too, either or, whichever is the pleasure of the board.
So at this point, there's 464 plus 21, and that would put another 66. Or another 45. If we did it on the ARPA. So it'd be more
So
for
that would be
the things that
509.
we're trying to get to.
So if someone would like to make a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to move the Merca equipment IT at the total of 45,000 from the general fund budget to the ARPA fund.
For ARP fund.
Second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. Do we have any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Hahn.
And then this next bullet is an email that we received from one of the board members requesting to remove items from the Parks and Rec budget. The infield groomer at 39,000, the weather system at 13,799, and the 10,000 for the Citizen Center doors, which is a total of 62,799.
Ms. Bender?
I actually want to make a pitch for one of these, and that's the weather system, because I actually saw the exact same one in action at a soccer fields in Richmond. And I don't know if the referees would have called it if that thing hadn't have gone off. And that storm came so fast that I could see how that would be really important, especially at Barnesfield, to alert to get children off of a field for safety reasons. So I would like to make a pitch that we keep that in there, the weather system. Thank you.
Sorry. I agree with Ms. Bender, and I mentioned the last time we talked about this, that I've been at soccer games at Sealston where it depends on the coach, really. Did you see lightning? No, I didn't see any lightning. Did you? Did you hear thunder? No, that's just a car backfiring in the parking lot. This makes it very clear that takes that discretion away from them, which could also minimize our liability. So I am all in favor of that. Thank you.
Not in favor, Mr. Shona.
There's just so many other options. I mean, I just thinking, we're down to kind of the nitty gritty here, and it would be a nice idea. And like I said, there's just so many other options that aren't $10,000. I just can't get behind that one.
Mr. Clark, I'm going to ask you about the infield groomer in particular. I'll let you speak to all of them if you want. But
so for the weather system,
yeah.
I did look at two. I have had virtual meetings with two of the other companies that make the full systems that not only do the lighting, but also do the heat. So we're worried about wet globe temperature in the summer, whether or not we should have kids still outside playing. Both of them are $10,000 per unit. They don't have an annual re-upping fee, which this one does. Whereas that's the $10,000 a year. So it would be, it's pay me now or pay me later. But I did shop on those other other ones that do the predictive stuff. So it's becoming more industry standard. It's not completely industry standard yet, but you know, so either way, I have that on my list of potential cuts. The infield grimmer to me really is the most valuable piece of equipment that we could add to our fleet. The other night, well, Tuesday, I was at the softball game watching my daughter, and I found another field that needs a lip removed. The softball field, somebody hit a hard ground ball past the second baseman. The right fielder charged it. It hit that lip, and it went over her head. So depending on the child and where they get, we've got a chance for those kind of balls to come up and hit somebody in the face. But that would make 15 fields that we could work on with that machine. In response, the other items that are there, the citizen center doors, I can live with those going away. We can find a way to work with general properties to correct the ones that are giving us trouble. But I mean, I would be more willing to lose the stage at $25,000 versus the groomer. And even if we had to split the groomer and buy, and Parks and Rec come up with half out of activity fund or out of Sealston CIP money.
So I'm going to ask for the field groomer. This is to replace, because there's an existing machine that is got over 2,000 hours.
Yep.
And it's not the same kind of machine though. It's a different one, correct?
Correct. Yes, the two machines we have right now are Tricycle Sand Pros.
Okay.
So they have 3 wheels. They're $23,000 right now.
Okay.
So that's the difference.
And could you remind me what the difference is and what this infield groomer does that the other one does not do?
So it's a stand-on machine. We're going to get it with, our goal is to get it with a laser level kit. So we'll be able to level the fields, which as you, this week actually, for a prime example, it rained Friday and Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
We were still closed on our baseball fields on Monday because our fields do not drain properly. They're not pitched out. So the water sits in the middle of the fields. If we can get them leveled properly, which when you do it level a field, you're not leveling it 0, you're leveling it with a 1 or 2 degree slope so that when the rain falls, it should run to the sides. This machine would allow us to work in different materials better. It comes with a variety of attachments that allow you to, so when we go to the elementary schools and we need to remove the grass and weeds that are growing in their infields, this can dig in like a tiller and pull those things out.
Okay.
Little League did a ton of work on the fields at Sealston at all 3 elementary schools. And we were up at Sealston today doing family day setup, and I walked over to the school to get something out of our storage room. And the field on the right side of the school is pretty much completely recovered in weeds. And they had a lot of volunteers out there spending hours that would give us a better ability to take care of those fields. Because long term, I've been having conversations with the athletic department at the high school about how can we work together to get all of the fields in the county prepared for all of our youth to use, because at this time we're using, between Little League and travel teams, we are using every diamond in this county that we own.
So Ms. Hahn, I'm going to ask, I'm in favor of the infield groomer. I would look to cut the weather PNR and the doors, but as a one-time expenditure, would that be something we could look to use general fund balance in order to procure?
Yes, we could.
Okay, I'll leave it to my colleagues then. I've given my opinion as well. I'm going to start with Mr. Datz. I'll come around to you.
So just to kind of bat for the weather center, just kind of a personal story. My brother's best friend was at a baseball game when he was in Little League, and the coach said, "Oh, that was kind of a car. It wasn't thunder," and he unfortunately passed away because he was struck by lightning. And so these kind of systems, if we have them, it prevents something that kind of will come up as liability, and it prevents us from having that. Yes, while we're kind of looking at the nitty gritty, like the other supervisor said, I think that this is something that we're taking a chance on. Yes, maybe it'll be perfect. There won't be a storm that, makes someone pass away. But if it does, then we're looking at a lot of liability.
Mr. Collins?
So government as a whole, everything they do is liable for everything that happens. So it's not that I ignore the liability. And you come up here every time we have a budget meeting. I don't know where the rest of the departments are because you give a pitch every time for all your stuff. But, we're looking at these monies and we're picking them apart. We're picking them down to the penny. And we got Dr. Boyd sitting over here. And we got people that work for the county every day, and they're not asking for these things. What they're asking for is a teacher raise and the county employee raise. So sometimes stuff like this has to be either put on the ARPA or put on another burner another year.
Absolutely, sir. And as a
So
parent of 4
that's
children that are in our school system, I completely agree that the teachers deserve what they need. And I have some other items that I'm willing to.
I didn't
help.
ask you to argue with me. I'm just.
I'm not, no, I'm not trying to argue.
Chris,
I
so
have some
this
things
is-
to help that I can offer up that could come out as well.
No, well, you should have been a lawyer instead of Parks and Rec because every time you have something answered to why something should be, I understand all that. And it's not, these items on here, I don't have a problem if we have them. It's just that we can't do everything all the time. We need to focus on our priorities. And I don't think that if you ask any teacher or any employee that an infield groomer is their priority. Mr. Chairman?
Sure. Ms. Bender?
Yes, thank you. I mean, the infield groomer or the weather system, I would like to see if maybe we can do ARPA because I mean, I know the teacher's salaries and I know the fire and EMS and I see a no. But to me, who's been a coach for a very long time and has seen, what I saw a couple weeks ago and an incident that happened at Pratt Park many years ago, that other coaches made the decision to ignore a tornado warning and I had to run and stop a race to save kids from the tornado touchdown in the field across from me. So, I mean, to me, safety of our children are important too. And I think there's a balance. And I have to admit that not all coaches pay attention or listen or want to stop the game. So that's just my pitch that sometimes we need to look into the future, be foresight as opposed to constantly cut, and not looking long term. Because I'm just making my pitch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clark, you mentioned something about a summer concert, something or other that maybe you could use the stage for the portable stage at $25,000?
Yes, and obviously that's 16 by 24. If we start doing events like that with the events coordinator, manager, or whatever we end up with settling on the title for, they're 4x4 pieces. So we could start lower than that.
No, I'm not asking that.
yes,
I'm not
we all-
asking you,
okay.
excuse me,
Yeah, we
excuse
should-
me. There's people on both sides talking, and I'm just trying to get answers to questions I have from you. Thank you. So can you foresee a logical tourism use for that stage that perhaps you could request money from the tourism fund for that one-time expenditure instead of what you've asked for previously?
Absolutely. If we added those events, obviously it would be used, it'd be in use right for this weekend at Family Day, which was a tourism funded event. It would be used for Independence Celebration, which is a tourism funded event. And the uses could go on from there.
Thank you very much.
So Mr. Collins was asking me, the 13,799 for the weather PNR, that is an upfront cost, but then there's a service every year, is that correct?
Yes, the 10,000 of that is an annual fee.
So the
we could look at-
recurring $10,000 cost is what you're
Yes,
saying?
unless we look at some of the other systems in more detail.
The 13,799 includes that 10,000 maintenance cost. So
For the first
system
year.
itself is 37.99. The 10,000 is the maintenance.
Correct, but then next year
service.
there would still be in
Yeah,
the lot.
10,000, and that's why we cannot use ARP funds because it's a recurring cost.
It's a recurring? Okay, that makes sense.
Put the system in and not start it till next year?
I mean, Guess you could install it and put it, we could put it in and leave it, but be kind of, if somebody saw it and recognized it and then was trying to figure out why it didn't go off, might be even worse.
Would it go off during the day if there's a storm?
So yeah, what you could do, you set hours on them. So obviously we wouldn't want an alarm going off at 2 o'clock in the morning. So we can set the end time of 10:30 or 11 o'clock, depending on the day of the week. So it ends with the ends of play.
I was thinking about during the school day, so if the kids are in school and there's an alarm, they could take cover.
And you can, Perry Weather, I believe the other two systems definitely had, because I just had conversations with them, have repeater stations. So you can put extra sirens in. So the one conversation I had with one of the gentlemen was, we put it at Barnesfield. Well, we can put an extra repeater at Wayside when we open it, and that there would be a siren there, and we could have a sign on it that at least we would be alerting these folks that are standing on a beach that, hey, a storm is coming, and you probably shouldn't be standing in the water anymore.
You can't stop stupid. It doesn't matter. People will still be in the beach. I don't care what you have.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Good.
Mr. Clark, you looked into getting with Chief Moody about any kind of grants through FEMA or anything for a system like that, since it is a local community weather-related system?
No, I have not, but my guess is, yeah, he'll probably direct me right to Captain Lynn, and I'd be happy to try to do that.
Another suggestion would be that you authorize us to just to pull this out right now, because this is for next year's budget. And we look at and give you more research and maybe demos or whatever to satisfy you to pull it out of this year's general fund balance. I mean, because it's
That was kind of
obviously
my
these
suggestion,
kind of
to
things
pull it
are,
out, and then as the year progresses, as this is what happens in the year I've been here, as the year progresses, we then spend money from the general fund balance that we have available that we didn't have available during the budget process. So there's money that comes available either through savings or otherwise. So that would be something that these things that we could pull out, and you can always spend them. I mean, you can always come back to them.
I understand, and I believe there's probably a desire from the board to see these removed from the current budget. Would that be, whether it's
current proposed budget,
and either to move forward with funding them via either ARP funding or general fund balance, or just removing them and revisiting later? Is that an accurate assessment? I don't want to speak for everyone, but
Yeah, I would remove that whole bullet point, look at it later.
so that would be pulled out of the budget. So I'm still going to advocate for the infield groomer. I think that is an important one to move forward with sooner than later. But I'll leave it to my colleagues to.
You could do the infield groomer out of ARPA as well. I'm not trying to,
No, I understand. Yep.
If you did the infield groomer ARPA, I'd be fine. And if you had to pick something on that list that you had to fund, of course, it would be the weather, if you had to. I mean, I'd like to pull them all out myself, but if we can come to a consensus of if you have to spend money in that particular category right there on that bullet point, which one would be the most important? The groomer for you.
So we'll remove it.
Ms. Kupka had asked about the stage. So the stage is not even in, we pulled that out. It's not in there. But if you want us to put it in and look through it, look for tourism funds, then we can bring that back to you as well.
I just have one other question. So you said that for the weather station, it's two separate charges. It's one for actually buying the system, and then the 10,000. So could you use that, however much it is to actually buy the system? Could you use ARPA for that or no? Since it's only a one-time purchase. No, the 10,000 is a recurring cost. Right?
I think because I would prefer not to do that. I would suggest not doing that because it could be seen as a recurring, because you have to keep up the maintenance on it. If it was something that you bought and it just, But that, it kind of, it doesn't do anything without the other.
Okay. Ms. Bender, you had something?
Yeah, I would say the infield groomer, I understand why that's important. So from the ARPA funds, I get that, but I'm gonna push for the weather system. And I'm even gonna throw it out, I wonder if that even can be included under tourism for the fact that at Barnesfield, it would be used for travel baseball and all that, and even at Sealston, if you had travel soccer.
So Mr. Stonehill said take out the weather. I say take out the weather till we can, see if we can afford it.
I would say remove it.
3. And the
So-
groomer was out.
For clarification purposes, the infield groomer, you want us to put through ARPA. So we would need you would need a motion on that.
If there was a desire to move forward with that. I've expressed my desire for that, but if there's not a will of the board, then it doesn't happen.
I don't have a problem with the groomer from ARPA, but not the general fund.
You have to make a motion. But you don't want to.
I was just seeing what everybody else was interested in.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? After the one-time purchase of the infield groomer, what recurring costs are there?
It would-
Annual maintenance?
Annual maintenance, it would be, there's already a line in the budget for our small vehicles. Because it would be replacing one.
And then is that maintenance done in-house or do you contract it out? Is it
Depends
contracted
on
service?
The,
How
the degree.
Level of difficulty? Okay. I could do that through ARPA for the infield groomer.
I'll make a motion, just make sure I'm doing this right. I'll make a motion to remove the infield groomer from the general fund and have it purchased through the ARPA funds.
Yes.
Second,
We have a motion properly seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
I'm sorry, was your
Was an aye.
in favor of it? Okay. Chair votes aye. Motion carries. I think Mr. Stonehill was
Yeah,
a
we
nay.
got it
So,
down.
okay.
And then the citizen center doors did you want us to
Right.
remove that as well?
Yeah.
For the interest of the board, I will develop a more comprehensive report on these weather systems so that we can compare them when I bring the information forward again.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. All right.
Okay, so after we went through all of that, it was the suggestions and you went through each line and agreed on each of those, either removing them totally or removing them and paying for those with ARP. That was a total of $592,799, which now brings the shortfall down to $2,375,417. Now, the next couple are a hard decision, and I don't know if y'all are ready for that tonight or not. And then as we found out tonight that the school's request this sheet does not include those new positions. So, so that and let me clarify that too, to make sure that in your revenue sheet, that bottom line revenue total there from the county does not include those positions.
The revenue sheet didn't
On your
include those
revenue,
positions?
Does not.
Does not, correct.
does not.
Mhm.
So currently, without that extra in there, the schools are requesting a total of $2,183,038 in new funding over what was funded for the current fiscal year. If you use the composite index, which and I should have put that in the slide, but the composite index is only 1,187,654 more than last year. There's a difference of their request is 1,095,384 greater than the composite index. So if you only funded at that composite index level, that would cut the budget shortfall down to 1.2 million.
Then you had the 615,000.
And then you add that, and then if you add that to it, then you're back up to almost 2 million again. That's already up at the top. That was already done at the top bullet.
Mr. Chair, this is probably a silly question, but I just want a clarifying question. So these numbers in the shortfall is what if the shortfall, that is what we would have to raise taxes to
Raise taxes, or if you look at the bottom.
the general fund?
You could use general fund balance to put in as a revenue source, which has been done by the county before.
Correct.
To keep from raising taxes.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, can I ask her a question? Thank you. So Ms. Hahn, what's the balance currently of the general fund balance?
After our last audit, the estimated fund balance is 10,300,444. That is the unrestricted fund balance. We have to, reserve so much for, by our policy, we have to reserve 15%. That's after that 15%. We also have, the revenue stabilization fund, but if we tap into that, the following fiscal year, we have to pay it back.
Thank you.
And we did have some other considerations.
So we did want to add this because I know that Ms. Bender had shared the information she got from when she was meeting with folks about what's going on in some of our surrounding counties. So as you know, a couple years ago, you all, the board, not all of you, but the board had adopted a pay plan that increased fire and rescue and sheriffs by a certain amount by position, but then they also set in place a step increase that's based on essentially a 3% annual increase. And so what we're proposing, we run the numbers, is that you consider changing it from 3% to 5%. So it would be an additional 2% that would be added to the for public safety, for fire and rescue, and for the sheriff's personnel. And so you can see that that's 132,245 for the sheriff's office, E911 and animal control, and then 81,452 for fire and rescue. This is not included in any of your numbers. This is just a proposal. And we, obviously we're trying to keep, Derek had a meeting with both the sheriff and with Chief Moody, and it's, I think, again, it's kind of the same thing that Dr. Boyd is talking about. You got to do this or you're going to start losing people.
So
Again.
So as far as the sheriff's office and the fire department, so when you all did this new structure for the pay, you realize that in a 2-year period that a lot of employees got up to a $40,000 raise, and some of them, the least amount was probably $6,000, but there was more in the $20,000 range for most people, and a lot of them at $40,000 more in 2 years. So to add another 2%, I don't think it'd be treating the other employees of the county fairly to add on to that. So I think that their step increases are, that the way that you all already did readjusted their salary scales is more than generous, more than generous.
And that certainly preceded me. That was a decision that the board made. We obviously are working through that, and I understand that point. But I also understand that it's that it is a very competitive situation out there. I know Spotsylvania County is 8.5% for fire and rescue employees. I know that Stafford did 15% for certain sheriff's levels. So it is something that's hard to deal with. I realize that, but it is a situation where if, like Dr. Boyd has eloquently put, you're gonna get eventually where you don't have the level of expertise to handle some of these important
But
services.
You took care of fire and rescue in the sheriff's office last time, and not the county employees, and somewhat the teachers. So the fire and rescue in the sheriff's office can't get a bite of the apple every year. I mean, does anybody that you know get a $40,000 raise in 2 years? Unless you become president or something?
Well, I know that you're gonna get a salary survey that's gonna probably show a lot of disparities. And the schools are gonna be doing the same thing, that are gonna show those disparities. And I mean, we'll have to present to you a plan, and you'll have to implement it if you choose to implement it. This is a proposal, Mr. Collins.
Yes,
I
sir.
realize that you have to make this final decision, but we did want to put this forward because we think that it's the time to do it. And if you don't want to do it, then I understand.
That was part of my point. You already did it not too long ago, and the county employees didn't get any of that. Any of that. And even some of the fire and rescue administrative didn't get anything. And the sheriff's office and the fire and rescue have done well in front of this board. I think that, and so has schools done well, $8 million last year. I think that if you are looking at the totality of this whole budget, that we still need to focus on the 5% for the teachers and 5% for the employees of the county, and take them off the rack for now. Is there any consensus or opinion?
Ms. Bender?
Thank you. I'm going to go a little different, but with the same tact in mind. So over the last month now, I've heard from many teachers, and I've heard from a lot of other people, and that some of the older teachers remind me of how for many years they didn't get any raise, they didn't get any increase. So the problem comes down to, what do we value? We value our fire and EMS. We value our county employees. We value our teachers. So maybe we get rid of all the stuff, including the new positions, and give more to the teachers and some of our own staff. Because here's the problem. You talk to the teachers, and I used to be on the other side of the fence, but especially in the last week, I've got a lot of conversations. And to make sure our kids get the right education, and I've really wrestled about this for a while, but it is true. If you don't, and I've talked about this for years, that King George, unfortunately, sometimes we don't spend money to get the value. And I think it's probably about time that we put a little extra to keep our teachers, because I will tell you, there's a lot of teachers at a lot of the schools that are going to walk because we don't have our budget in place and they don't have their salaries. And so who are we going to get for them? And I know Dr. Boyd has said we've kind of lowered our standards a little bit to find people. So why are we treating our kids that way? I think we should, and this is just a bold, because I asked Dr. Boyd earlier about this. What if we made it a little higher for the teachers' salaries and show them that we want to invest them in the bus drivers and all of that, and just get rid of the stuff, except for the power school that we have to pay a little extra to that and diesel costs. But we shed the new positions, we get rid of all that, and we give them a little bit more. And I asked a bold question. I asked 10% to show them that we value them for once. And that came in, and Dr. Boyd, you can confirm, this is just for the salaries, so this is for everybody. It's $3,533,634, and that would be offset if you cut out all the teacher position, the new positions of that. So that's just my bold thing, because I know it's a scare tactic, and I always fight against scare tactics, but they're really recruiting in Stafford to take those teachers, and they're ready to go, because from my rumor I've heard, they're clearing out an elementary school to absorb them, and it's the elementary school that's near Stafford line. So I'm just putting it out there. We need to invest in our own employees to keep them. And that's all across the board. Thank you.
Good, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I started in the education business in 1972. And at that time, I was a drill instructor at Parris Island. And I had a roll company gunny down there that said, Frank, if you look into the eyes of the children, you'll see the future. That has stuck with me for, the last 50 years. We need to invest in the schools and the teachers. You're either going to pay it now or you're going to pay it later down the road. But it would be much cheaper if we pay it now. I haven't heard anybody mention, and I don't understand, a tax increase. And if I think, Ms. Hahn, 1 cent is how much? Is that like 390,000 or something?
Sorry. Currently, 1 cent is equal to $405,013. I have a sheet here that I can pass around to you all that shows you if at the different tax rates on, this is on real property.
So, but I think the citizens of King George would be willing to pay a tax increase in order to ensure a good education for their children and their grandchildren. Thank you.
I want to just add to that. I think Mr. Collins put it perfectly when he said that we love the fire department, we love the police department, but this year, we really have to focus on teachers. And, Dr. Boyd has laid out, fact by fact on how we're slowly slipping away. And as someone who just graduated, I can tell you, our children are suffering. And, if we don't fully fund them, or if we don't do the 10% like Ms. Bender is now suggesting, I think that's a very good idea. And this is kind of a question to Ms. Hahn. I know that the law has been just changed for e-cigarette tax. Is that something that the county is doing, or is the county willing to do that?
That is something that the county attorney has been visiting. And so at this time, it would take an ordinance change. So I don't believe that this is something that we could accomplish before for this next fiscal year.
I appreciate that. And just to kind of wrap up what I'm thinking, I think it's time that we kind of really focus on teachers and say later on in a couple of years, maybe we can revisit this idea because it is really important. My grandfather was a fireman. I understand all that. I know the struggle. So yes to this, but in a couple of years, and when we kind of get I'm more worried about this debt. That really caught my eye. And so we kind of need to figure out a lot of other things before we kind of say another 2%.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my suggestion is, where is the chief? Where is the sheriff? If they want this, they can come here and explain to us their justification of their need. And I'm not saying I'm a no, and I'm not saying I'm a yes, and I will always do everything I can for our public safety. But Mr. Collins mentioned too, that was going to be my question, is I don't think any of the administrative staff in either of those departments received the bump. It was only for sworn personnel. It was not for civilian personnel. So then are they included in the 5% that the rest of the county employees
They are
is
not.
proposed?
Yes, they would be,
Yes.
would be a part of the 5%.
Because they count, so they are counted in that. So they will have the 5%.
Yes.
So otherwise, I'd like to see the sheriff and the
We'll-
chief
We'll make sure they're
come
here.
justify the need. If that's a need, then let's hear from them. And then,
Again, if I can just answer that. So Ms. Bender had presented that to us, and knowing that your time is running out, we put this together. I'll be happy to have, I'm sure Chief Moody would love to come here and talk about the justification. And I'm sure that Sheriff Giles can talk about the justification. But you know, again, we put this forward and if you're, you know, we can have them at the next meeting. Because if we go, you know, then you don't really adjust during the start of the fiscal year. So that was our concern, is that this is stuff that's filtering out. We all are hearing about these adjoining counties to us that are doing things. I understand how you handled it the last time. I think you could also probably ask them why were administrative positions not included. I think the immediate answer is they don't go through the same level of training and the certification requirements that the paid staff go through, and that's why.
So you're saying this upsets me. You're saying that one employee is not as in value as the other employee just because they have a badge or they can put out a fire. You tell me that an administrative employee, you tell me people in this building right around the corner are not as valuable as another employee. I mentioned this
that.
last year. That's exactly where it comes across.
No, I'm saying that they
exactly
were
how it
not
comes across.
included at the time that they did this analysis. And I do think that Ms. Kupka is correct. Let's get them here and let's them talk about what they did and how they handled it. But I'm sure that that folks that are in law enforcement, you were in law enforcement, and the level of training and certification that you get is different than my training.
It is, but when I went back to the office, I needed to have a secretary and the other people in that department to process all the work that I did. So they have as just much as value as I do.
Well,
They're not wearing a gun or having a fire hose.
But what we
But they
try to
have the
do
same
is
value.
those administrative personnel are within a classification that allows them to move within the organization to go from, for instance, the fire department to go to work for the service authority or to go to work in finance. That's the lateral and the fluidity of those positions. But I'm happy to get them here and have a
Let's
further
move forward with
discussion.
having them come. I don't think we need to belabor this anymore. They can advocate for it at that point. I would not be in favor of putting it in at this time. But I believe Ms. Bender had a question.
I'm sorry, I wasn't finished.
Oh, I apologize.
I was going to make a statement as well. I'm not sure if I'm quite at 10%, Ms. Bender, but we have to do something for our teachers and staff, not just the licensed teachers, but the support staff as well, the paras. And I too have heard from many, many staff, and the first thing I've asked them is, what do you need? I need better pay. I need better pay, and I don't have a contract right now. So I don't know if I'm going to have a job. I probably will have a job, but I don't have a contract. And it makes me think maybe I should look elsewhere for a job. And then my next question is, well, is there anything else you need? Is there anything else we could give you that would help with your situation? Any other benefits? No, because if you give me more money, I can choose how to spend it on my own priorities. And this teacher's priority may be different than this teacher's priority may be different than this para's priority may be different than this person's priority. So over and over and over again, I'm hearing from school staff, compensation is a major problem. And we have people with master's degrees. I talked to someone today who is a licensed teacher and has a master's and is taking home $2,800 a month. I mean, wow. So compensation is definitely a priority.
I was going to mention something else, but I'm going to jump on the back end of what Ms. Kupka said. One of the other things that, especially the bus drivers, some of them travel quite a distance to drive a bus for us. And so the cost of, coming, they can't offset if we only give a little tiny pay increase. They can't offset. And then also other teachers that are on the county, the health insurance, when that goes up, their raise is, if it's a small raise, it's just off balance with how much they have to pay for extra health insurance. And so I think we do have to invest in our teachers. And I was one who used to, in the past, not focus on that. But I think it's time that we show we care about the people who teach our kids. And maybe we can even get some of those folks that live in the other localities to come and live here too. If we have more pay, incentivize them. But before Mr. Collins jumps in, the one thing I wanted to mention is, and I don't know if Ms. Kupka was here when I mentioned, the information I gave you about the fire and rescue came from when I was at the VACO Board of Directors. And a lot of the other localities were especially talking about how much they raised the salaries to try to keep their employees, and then we also discussed about how we can't keep having these war of salaries, because in the end, it hurts all of us. And there's got to be some agreement that all of us could talk about. And they actually might be bringing up at VACO in November about, is there a way that we could all work together and stop this game of raising salaries? But that might not be, but it's a good idea.
So when you talk about bus drivers and folks driving to come work here, you realize that we're probably one of the only counties around that offer the health insurance to the bus drivers. So that's why they come here. Because they come from other counties to get the health insurance. So that's the benefit they've received. I don't think that 10%, you talk about this county and that county and that county, we will never be able to compete with them until we pull in the revenue in this county, and we're working on that, but we're not there yet. And we don't have it this year. I mean, the 5% for the teachers and the 5% for the county staff is going to be tough as it is. So to give people false hope of 10%, I don't know that's fair. If the governor does the other 2%, the General Assembly, we still have to find money for the SOQs and that to pay the non-SOQ employees the other 2%. So, I think that you can't, it's like your own personal budget. You can only spend what you got. You can't keep dipping.
Thank you. So I'd be in favor of trying to move towards more of a 7% for the schools, just to try to remain competitive. And so I don't know what that would actually mean from a budgetary perspective. Appreciate the recommendation to go to 10. I think that might be a little too much to bite off this year, but
So to get direction, you would like us to come back or ask Dr. Boyd to, I guess he's done that, but then we need to make sure that some of the other numbers are included, because the positions were not included in your information. So if you're saying 7%, then we need to come back.
that would be 7%, assuming that the state then does but I'm saying regardless, if the state chooses not to move forward with funding up to 7% for the SOQ positions, that we would do 7%.
And we'll get that.
That's my
Why
recommendation.
can't we revisit that depending upon what they do? Why can't we just have firm at 5%, find that money through all these things, stay firm at 5, and if the state comes back with the 7, then try to figure it out from there instead of guaranteeing something that I don't think we have the money for unless you start raising.
Because of the concern, as Dr. Boyd has brought up, in order to retain and attract quality educators, I think this is something that is important. And I don't even know if 7% would be enough. I hope it would. You said we have 27 vacancies for teacher vacancies currently, 40 vacancies across the schools.
Yeah, it varies by day, but it's right around there.
So I'll come to you in a second, Mrs. Bender. I'm not opposed to the new positions, because I don't think that they're not needed. But with all those vacancies, it's just hard to say, let's add more positions that might be vacant. I would like to try to address the salaries in order to get to the point where we don't have those vacancies. At that point, we could look to start adding more positions. But that's I'm just so, Mr. Miller, I wasn't trying to direct because I'm only one person, and that was just my opinion. And it was a little bit different than everyone else's. So that was just kind of sharing my idea and seeing what everyone else may think of it, and maybe trying to work towards a consensus on maybe what we would like to see brought forth in order for the schools to be able to move forward with putting out contracts.
Mr. Chair, I was just putting out 10 as a thing. I would even go down to 8. But here's one of the problem, and the game of telephone, when rumors go around, some teachers are saying that they've heard that they're going to get 5, and as soon as the budget is passed, they're going to get 2 more. So the rumors are already going around. So the problem is when they get the contract and they don't see it, that's another reason they might walk. And I know that's all a game of chicken you're playing, but in the end, I think if we just gave 5%, a lot of the teachers, here they go again, just giving us the bare minimum. And it's not showing the value.
I think the one
Bare
question I would
minimum.
have, Dr. Boyd, when do you have to release contracts?
So thank you. That's and I greatly appreciate all of this conversation, and I am in full support of it. Expediency is of importance to us too, and I know that's a tall order, but we've got about 12 days of school left, and we certainly would like to have enough. And I know this is a difficult ask, enough knowledge to be able to issue contracts before they walk out the door, because as Supervisor Bender has brought up, it certainly opens the door to many other opportunities. We would like to get a contract in their hand. We would like to get a signed contract back from them, because as I mentioned last time, it is a very monumental moment in the school year when you deliver them a contract and receive one back in return signed. When you don't, you hear all of these rumors about who's staying and who's going. You really don't have a firm understanding on that until you get a signed contract back or not. And if we miss that opportunity before the school year's out, we're going into the summer with a lot of variables in play.
That's why I keep harping on the 5%. So you can say 5%, give them the contracts. We figure out how to come up with the money. But to say 10 or 8 or 7 is a fairy tale with the amount of money that we need. So be true and fair to them, and we're never going to compete. This whole walking, fire department teachers walking, that's the natural course of business. Spotsylvania has 108 openings now. Stafford has 200, and matter of fact, they're cutting teachers in Stafford, by the way. They are, their budget is short, so what they're doing is they're having, like, you have to go to this school for governor's school, everybody goes to that school, so they're saving a bunch of money, so they're actually cutting back on teachers. So they don't have as many openings, but they're going to still have, 100 or more openings. Spotsylvania's going to have 100 or more openings, and every other school district around here is going to have openings. It doesn't matter if you pay teachers 20%, you are going to have openings in all these districts because there's not enough of them. So the 5% is something you can say, okay, this is what you get. You're going to at least get 5%. And if they make the decision, if they're going to leave because of 2%, then that's pretty fickle. If you're here in this county because of a 2% raise, that's pretty fickle. I'm not going to say I don't want you. I'm just saying that's pretty fickle.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Collins, I hear what you're saying, and as far as the people leaving, and yes, that's happened, and it happens every year. The problem now is, in years past, there was a big pool to pull from to get teachers. That pool no longer exists. So what you get now, if we wait, or if we don't make this raise, is you get, and I'll use this term loosely, the dregs. You get what's in the bottom of the barrel. And it didn't used to be that way. I'm sure Dr. Boyd remembers when you could go to school hiring positions and there would be a couple of hundred young, new teachers there. That's not happening any longer. There is not a pool to draw teachers from. Therefore, we have to do something to keep them.
Right, but King George can't solve the country's problems on that. So, and 5%, I was on the school board for 8 years, and for 8 years, the teachers got a raise every single year. That was top priority. Every year they got a raise. Matter of fact, the third year on the school board, we did a salary comparison, and we were within the third division in all the divisions around that we were competing. So every year, we're gonna have the same issue. So, you know, you can't make, you can't get where the teacher's coming from. There's no teacher tree. Nobody has one. 5% is, you know, that's another year that they've gotten another raise. That'd be 8, 9, 10 years then. But I mean, you know, where's all this money coming from? I asked y'all, where's all this money coming from? We're trying to, I thought 5% was something we agreed upon earlier. And it was, you know, and if we could do the extra 2, and then the water got muddy with 10, and the water got muddy with people who walk. You know, there's only so much control that we have.
Just a second. I think Dr. Boyd had something, and then I'll come back to you, Ms. Kupka.
Yeah, so real quickly, we just got a text that we have to, in order for us to allow enough time for teachers to review their contracts, we have to have them out by next Friday, just so everybody knows, in order for them to have enough time to review them and get them back. I'll just go back to what, you know, the original presentation I made last year. Because of all the fluidity in the market and everything that was going on in the county and really the surrounding counties, COVID, number of factors. A lot of school divisions around us outpaced us pretty substantially when it came to teacher raises. And as I think Mr. Collins just pointed out, the year we did the salary comparison, we were in 3rd place. And that was behind Stafford, behind Spotsy. King George came in 3rd. Our local community was comfortable with that. Our teachers knew we weren't catching Stafford, we weren't catching Spotsy. We still know that. Where we currently exist is we're in 5th place of the 6 surrounding school divisions. So currently we fall behind Westmoreland. Currently we fall behind Fredericksburg. All 5. The only one we're ahead of right now is Caroline. And I can tell you they're all attempting to make decent salary strides as well. So again, you know, to Sergeant Major's point, when in many years past, when I've gone to teachers' fairs and had thousands of teachers lining up looking for jobs, that's now a 0. They're not lining up for jobs. So what we're doing is competing for a finite resource, and to be competitive in that market and back in that 3rd place position would be very desirable when it comes to attracting and retaining our teachers. Thank you.
Ms. Kupka.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So question then for Ms. Hahn, if I'm reading the budget discussion cuts and other funding sources slide correctly. So without doing the additional consideration on the next slide for now.
Right.
So we'd be looking at the next to last bullet point. If the will of the board was to provide the additional funding in the amount
So
based on the composite index, the shortfall would then be $1,208.33. And then if we wanted to do the 7%, assuming the state ponies up the other portion of the 7%, that's an additional $111,368.
okay, so what that discussion was there was that the ask from the schools is more than the composite index. So if you go back up to the very top to give the schools what they've asked for in their revenue sheet that they've provided, that is $2,375,417 short. The discussion below that was.
So it's just based on the composite index.
Right. And it's because their ask is greater than the composite index.
So, and that's what I'm trying to get at. So we're looking at the 2183,038 plus the 111,368, which is 22.
So the shortfall was before you look at what the schools were asking for, that their ask is in the 2,375,000. The next 3 bullets talk about what the request is, what if we only did the composite index, and then what the shortfall would be. So if you provided the total amount of funding that is requested in Dr. Boyd's revenue projection, your shortfall is that very top bullet up there of $2,375,417.
Okay, thank you.
And that does not include those new positions
Correct,
or the 111 for the 7%.
correct. And so we could use fund balance to bridge some of that gap,
Yes, ma'am.
to not have a high tax increase.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, that's, okay, thank you.
Would there be a scenario, and I mean, we're getting into the minutia of their budget. I know we're not supposed to, but would there be a scenario where you could accomplish what some of you all are talking about of the 7% and then ask the superintendent to reduce the rest of his budget by 2% with the idea that if the state comes back with 2% more for the raises, you would utilize that. You're already doing the 7%, but you would be asking them to reduce their other portions of their budget by the 2%. And then when the state comes back to give you the 7% raises, you've already got it. That 2% delta would be something you could add back in to their operating budget. I don't know. I mean, is that something?
I think what he's suggesting is if you cut expenditures by 2% to cover an additional 2% in pay increases, but they're not going to be equal because salary, I think salary is the biggest bulk of your budget. And so it won't be apples to apples.
You go back to the page I brought this evening. You know, these are our new expenditures on top. So, you know, as transparent as we can be, that 5% is going to be another $1.2 million in the budget. There's some other associated costs with those salaries. That's a $62,000 bump. The increase in the health insurance that we split with employees, again, a cost we can't avoid, is $364,000. And then, you know, like I said, just to, you know, to get us to that, without the new positions and without the 7% in there, the budget builder necessities, like we've talked about, the power school, the diesel fuel, you know, we've all lived through a year of inflation. We've all lived through costs going up, and what that $512,000 is, the school division's cost to do business going up. So that gets us right there to that 2.1 without the 111,000 addition for if the state comes back with the 7% raise, and then the new positions follows that.
Mr. Stat, you had something?
Just to kind of go back to what Mr. Collins is saying, it's kind of mind-boggling to me, just as a former student who knows, you know, what our schools are going through right now. And I can tell you, there are plenty of teachers who don't own a home. They're scraping by because inflation is rampant right now. The economy isn't that great. So the 5% to me, I look at that as just catching up with inflation, and kind of it shouldn't be something we should be proud of by any chance, because teachers are struggling so much right now. And I think you, Mr. Chairman, put it perfectly. If you don't even know if 8% would be enough or 7% would be enough, but I understand that we probably couldn't do the 10% because we don't have money going out of everywhere. The issue is that teachers, I can tell you, teachers are willing to walk over 2%. It's because that's not 2% that's going in their pocket so they can go on vacation. That's 2% of groceries, bills, electricity, other things like that. So I kind of want to go away from that debate of like, well, that's just 2%. Well, 2% to teachers can mean a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Stats. Not to put you on the spot, Mr. Stonehill, but I am going to ask for you to weigh in just so that we can try to work towards some kind of consensus. We could debate all night. I'm sure we don't all want to be here all night. Not that it's not important, but if we can try to work towards some, if we have a majority of the board who feels a certain way, let's try to get to that point and call it a day and then move on from there.
Well, I'm really glad that we're all sitting down, because I really agree with Mr. Collins. And If we were standing up, some of us would fall down, but at this time, probably 95% of what he said, I agree with 100% of that 95%. I would be all in favor of the 5%, and I have all my numbers all scribbled down and stuff, and I have a number in mind, and it's I just think we have just such a big budget. We don't have the money coming in. I mean, we're scrambling here at the end. So, like I said, I am in agreement mostly with Mr. Collins.
You said you had a number in mind? I am putting you on the spot. I'm trying to get us to, that's what I'm trying to do, get us to a number so we can put it in and have it as a placeholder.
I don't know if my math is right, because
Okay.
I have a hard time with all those digits on my phone.
Fair enough.
I was looking anywhere from 22,500 to 23,20 or 285, somewhere in that
sorry.
kind of range.
You said 22.5 to what was it?
Like, I think 22,500.
Okay. That was your low end?
Yes.
So about a 1.4 million increase, roughly. Because it's 21.1 right now. So if it's 22.5, that would be 1.4.
Well, that's going all the way down to this chart to let's see, what did I do here?
So the 2375417 on our current slide would include up to the budget builder necessities, which is the 2183038 line.
Right, that's what I got. So I got like 23,285, somewhere in there. I think that would probably be my high end.
Okay, so 23,283,038.
Yes.
Okay. So on the high end, you would go all the way up to the budget builder necessity is what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, tracking. Thank you.
Like if I absolutely had to.
Understood. Ms. Kupka, I'm going to ask where you might be standing.
So I would go one step further up to the 7% number here.
To the 2294, so additional
2294406.
the additional 111368. Okay. Mr. Collins.
I would do the 5%. And then the associated cost with the health insurance.
So the third line?
There.
So the third line, the 1.6. So the associated costs with the salaries as well as the health insurance, you said?
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying the 1,670,169.
Yes.
Okay, that's your cut line. Okay.
Sorry.
Ms. Bender.
I need to ask a clarifying question on this one.
Sure.
So if we went with the 7% teachers and with the compensation, does that include the new positions or not the new positions?
Does not include the new positions.
So I would go with the 7% with the no new positions and the compensation.
That's the 2294.
Mm-hmm.
The 2294406.
Yes.
That's the line I'm at as well.
And so that amount right now, I believe it would actually be higher than that amount because the state has not passed a budget yet.
Mhm.
So I'll ask I guess Ms. Kupka and Ms. Bender in particular. I was advocating to say let's do 7%, regardless of whether the state would do 7%. If the state does do 7%, obviously, then that would mean we could retract some of those funds. But that was what I was advocating for originally.
I
But
agree.
You all would need to run the numbers for
I would like to
us.
understand what that is, but yes. Mrs. Bender?
That's what I wanted. I wanted to know what the figure would be, the end figure at 7.
Okay, I don't think we're gonna have that tonight.
Do we have a round, like, I know this one's 7% is 2294. Is that, how far off would that number be?
The 2294.
Yeah,
The difference, if we went with 7% for teachers and 5% for all staff, would be an additional 100 funds.
But that's assuming that the state were to provide the additional 2% for the other SOQs.
Yeah, I would have to run the numbers again if the state did not provide the additional.
So I think Ms. Binder was asking, do you even have like a rough idea? Like, would it be $1 million? Like, what order of magnitude are we talking? 6 figures? 7 figures?
I'm also concerned that they just said that would only be for teachers. I would feel it would really look bad if we didn't do 7 all across the board for both, because that, you know,
Yeah, right now, this number just includes 7 for teachers and 5 for everybody.
so everybody else.
We can run the numbers for 7 across the board.
Because I would like to see that number, because I know it's more money, Mr. Collins, but how would you feel if a bus driver and you only get 5 and they get 7?
I'd feel terrible, and I would want to do 5 for everybody. I've always been on that vein that everybody gets the same raise.
I agree with you. That's why I'm saying,
But not 7, 5.
So what I'm hearing is, what we need to get back to you is what it's going to cost if the board decides to go 7% and the state does not come back with 7.
Correct.
And the second number would be what it would cost to do a 7% salary increase across the board with both options. If the state comes back with 7% and if the state does not come back with 7%. So we need 3 numbers.
I would like to see that. I think at least we have, now we haven't voted, obviously, but I think we at least have an appetite to take on the 5%. So is that, I feel like, a fair assessment amongst my colleagues? So I'm not telling you to put your contracts out, but I'm just saying, if you don't want to hold off, I don't know how it works exactly. Like, if you can amend them, I assume you can amend them later as we make a determination if we would go higher, but.
Mr. Granger?
Yes.
Would the board consider meeting on next Tuesday night, the 9th, and then?
I think Tuesday is a no-go for Ms. Kupka in particular.
Okay,
So,
that's right. I'm sorry.
I would like to avoid Thursday because, and Ms. Kupka brought this up to me earlier, as the economic development business appreciation dinner, I really think we should avoid having a meeting that night. I would like to attend in support of Mr. Minor and the recognition of our small businesses, or all of our businesses in our community. So I'm going to ask my colleagues if they would be willing to. I know Mr. Collins doesn't like Wednesdays, but would you guys?
I'll drop a Wednesday.
Okay.
then I can't make it because I already scheduled the track end of season party for that day. So sorry, I can't.
That's okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
would
ma'am.
there be any appetite for the board to attend? So the business appreciation dinner on Thursday night is scheduled for 5:30 to 7:30.
Yes.
Perhaps if we went for a decent amount of time and then we had to leave to conduct county business, I think everyone would understand and appreciate the situation that we're in, that we did show up to honor our businesses and to support our Economic Development Authority and our Department of Economic Development and Tourism. So maybe like a 7 o'clock meeting that night, we just push it back an hour.
Okay. And I think the main focus would be really just to look at the item about the school.
And I do.
Oh, if the sheriff would like to be there as well?
Sheriff
Yep. And Chief Moody. Yep. I don't want to put too much on. If we're getting started a little bit later, I want to put too much on. Do my colleagues feel?
I think that the main thing you need to provide would be the direction to the schools so they can fulfill that part of it.
I agree.
If there's some kind of a lag of anything that we still have to work on, then, because I think you know there's going to be a gap between the revenue that you are projected to have and the expenditures. So
Understood.
how we get to that is a big discussion item. We'd be happy to do it that night, but I also think the primary focus will be what you do with the schools. I would agree with you guys on that.
Agreed. Mr. O'Neill, you amenable to the?
I guess it's bring a toothbrush.
All right, Mr. Collins, Ms. Binder, 7 o'clock Thursday. Really, the primary focus really being just to kind of look at this piece of the budget, and I would assume it would be not as lengthy of a meeting.
But we're not gonna have sheriff and chief, because if Moody's here, will be 2 hours in presentation.
He can be brief.
I've never seen it before.
Okay. We'll shoot for Thursday at 7 o'clock then.
Would you like us here at that meeting as well?
Well,
Yes, we
I
will
think
be
it
here
would
at
probably
that
be
meeting.
good
And
since
so,
questions are for you, or we have for you, so.
and we'll see if we can't get you those numbers by the close of business on Tuesday. We
Okay.
got to run some salary scales, and we'll email that to you so you can mill it over well before the meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Boyd.
Yes, sir.
Okay. In that case, here's my agenda.
It will be in this room.
Okay. So I think we've addressed all the different budget discussions at this point. And I think for next steps, we're looking to then meet next Thursday at 7 o'clock. Is there any other business to bring before the board?
Mr. Granger, if I can just do some procedural stuff.
Sure.
If you have this meeting on the 11th, and let's say that, something really wonderful happens and you all agree on a common budget to put together, then we could set the public hearing at the meeting on the 16th, and then you could have the meeting for your public hearing in the first meeting in June. Just to give you a calendar insight.
Okay.
I wouldn't get too ahead of yourself on this.
No, I'm just giving you an
Best case
idea.
scenario.
Right. So you gotta have a 2-week, layover on any kind of public hearing, so. Yeah.
Understood. I appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. Stats, did you have something you want to say?
Just one thing. So the county website, if you pull up the calendar, it already says we have a meeting on the 11th anyways. That was,
Correct. Okay. In that case, if there's no other business to bring before the board, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to adjourn to Thursday, May 11th at 7 o'clock PM in the boardroom.
Second.
We have a motion properly second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, chair votes aye. Motion carries. We're adjourned.